I'm glad that we're able to make this work because there's a little bit of flexibility on both sides, but when it
Yeah.
comes to feminine and masculine energy, we can always come together and make it work, right?
We can always find time, right?
Absolutely. So, do me a favor, actually. I guess my first question to you is for those who may or may not know, why is it important to understand feminine and masculine energy?
Well, boy, how much time do we have, right? The list is long, and I think if I were to nutshell it for our listeners here, feminine and masculine energies are basic energies of the psyche. So they exist within the psychology of every human. It's basically a way for us to understand the juxtaposition of life. Up and down, inside and outside, light and dark, black and white. Everything really in our world exists in some sort of duality or opposition. And for us as humans in these bodies, masculine and feminine is how it has organized itself within our psyche. So as we better understand what those energies are, the principles, the properties, we ultimately learn more about ourselves. And perhaps even more importantly, we learn about our partnerships and our relationships. Because, as much as we like to talk about and pursue individual work and personal self help work, none of us lives on this planet alone and in isolation. And we are truly relational beings. So, when we understand the relationship of masculine and feminine within us and in our psyche, we ultimately, hopefully, do a better job of understanding our relationships on the outside because, let's be honest, our relationships are the things that challenge us and trigger us most.
Would it be then wise for someone to understand their own energy in their life?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, I think that in terms, yes, it's very helpful to understand our own energy. It's very helpful to understand what we may be leaning into that is either authentic or inauthentic. I do primarily work with women, and we live in this culture that is really dominated by more masculine energy and values masculinity over femininity. And look, that is changing. We're making great strides, but we're not 100% there yet. And we've also lived with this masculine paradigm for so long, many of us haven't really recognized it. It's like when you're living inside the box, you don't understand what's outside the box. So there's just a lot of education and training around how we've been living and how it may actually be on the more masculine side. And for a woman who identifies as a feminine woman, we want to be aware of that because if we're donning too much masculinity, if we're repressing our own femininity, number one, that's inauthentic, but number two, that's exhausting. And it leads to burnout, resentment, overwhelm for women all the time. So to understand these energies better and how they operate within us is really important to your own sense of authenticity, your own sense of freedom, your own sense of relaxation, your own sense of agency, and ultimately your own sense of being in the world and hopefully manifesting whatever you have to bring to this life with the greatest potential possible.
I shared with you earlier that I work with a lot of women who have seen the darker side of life and maybe
Yeah.
people, men specifically, but people in general. And one of the struggles I've seen them go through is they feel uncomfortable with men who aren't abusive, so let's say who are healthy, who are in
I
their
see.
masculine from a
Yeah.
source of care but not control.
Right.
Um, how can we maybe help those women to show them there is good out there and to help them become more comfortable with the healthier side of masculine energy?
Wow, Taryn, that is it's such an on point and very, very powerful question. And I appreciate you asking it. And I want to name that that's not an uncommon experience for women, even for women who haven't necessarily experienced more severe forms of abuse or different kinds of abuse. Women are often almost trained, enculturated, used to putting on a lot of protection mechanisms in order to navigate our world. And we often become dysregulated in our own nervous systems as a result. For women, accepting care often comes with strings. An example I give to my clients many times is, it's very common. I'm sure many women have experienced this. You go out, you're having fun. Maybe you're at a bar, a restaurant, a club, somewhere, and a man comes and offers to buy you a drink. That could be a simple gesture of care, but historically, in our culture, in our world, in our context, that often puts the strings on and makes us feel as if we then owe them. And that one simple exchange triggers a whole cascade of responses inside a woman to arm her up, to protect, to be leery of this person who perhaps may just be offering a drink. We don't know, right? But the implications of it are often so much deeper because unfortunately, and I hate this statistic, but and I'm sure you know the answer to this. Do you know who the most dangerous man a woman will ever meet is, Train?
I have an idea, but I don't think I know.
Her husband. Statistically, it's her husband. So we have to walk around this world with this kind of armor of protection up. That's exhausting. It's tiring. I don't think it's fair. It is a way for us to feel safer in the world. And so when a man arrives with a whole heart, with healthy masculinity, it may actually be so foreign and unknown that it still triggers the same kind of dysregulated protection in the woman. It's very difficult for us to discern, especially from the outset, whether this care and healthy masculinity is true, authentic, and will stay. Many perpetrators, predators, abusers are excellent at showing us care at first, giving us a sense of safety and security, which women crave, and then essentially turning that on its head and creating situations of abuse that we then find very, very difficult to extract ourselves from.
I've seen that happen where they thought it was good and it was until it wasn't.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And look, I think that humans are brave. If you look at the long history of evolution of humans, humans are brave, and we have to be. We have to be intrepid. And actually, the survival of our species really relies on us being in relationship, relying on each other, partnering with one another. We've come as far as we have evolutionarily because we exist in tribes and community. So there is a bit, and I applaud all of us for this, an inbuilt sense of bravery trying to trudge back out there and be like, okay, well, maybe this time. Well, maybe this time. Maybe we've learned our lesson. And it is very difficult to read those signs early on when we're being shown care, cherishing, what we think of as authenticity. Look, and one of the things I do with a lot of the women I work with, because I work with women one on one in coaching. I work with them in groups, and I work with them on exactly this. And I work with really high powered, high achieving women too, who are deeply ashamed that they weren't, quote, smart enough to see this, right? They didn't see the signs. They should have seen it coming. And all that shame almost compounds. They feel even more scared to speak up and talk about it. And I'll call myself out. I've been through it myself. As a high powered achieving woman, I've also been in an abusive relationship where it took me over a year to tell anyone what was going on because I should have known better. So, there's a lot of pressure on women to put on a brave face, to make it look like everything's okay, to appear as if, you've got it all together. Meanwhile, you're like the duck's feet under the pond, paddling away, exerting all of that energy, making that top kind of graceful glide look effortless and seamless. And that level of dysregulation in the nervous system has real physical effects on women. And it actually can change your brain chemistry. It can alter your thought patterns. It certainly leads to anxiety and depression. And all of these things effectively become a downward spiral. And what I believe you will know, Terrain, in your work with women who've been in relationships like this, and what I know is that, and I don't say this because I don't think women are capable. I know women to be capable of anything, but women who are in an abusive cycle like this, they cannot escape alone. They need support. They need a friend, a system, a network. They need family. They need someone outside of them to help them through this because, of course, another statistic that I don't love, but that is true, is when is the most dangerous time for a woman in an abusive relationship?
I would say when she leaves.
Yes, the moment she decides to leave. Nothing is more dangerous than that moment. So, knowing that, and many women do know that, many women do their best to make it work and stay. And that's brave. That's brave. But it can also be incredibly detrimental.
Do you see some women who decide to leave? When they do leave, they go back.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, again, I always want to speak to the goodness and the bravery of the humans on both sides of this equation, right? Everyone has the power to change. Everyone has the power to make great decisions. And going back, the women that I know who go back to abusive relationships, and many do, this is statistically true. Most go back at least several times before they finally make a final exit, if they might make a final exit. And I believe it's hope. So I did an informal study with the women in my community a while back, asking them, what are the reasons that you either stay or go back? Is it because you're financially trapped? Is it because of the kids? Is it because I think I gave like 8 or 10 different reasons. And the far and away number one reason that every woman who answered that question ticked off was the hope that things will get better. Look, if you look at that in isolation, that's a brave and good choice made from the big heart of a woman who loves deeply. And I want to name that these abusers aren't, in their totality, they're not 100% abusers, right? They have other qualities. They have other things going on. Maybe they're really smart. Maybe they have windows of kindness. Maybe, they were, for several years, that big-hearted, kind, healthy masculine. Maybe something tripped that switch. Maybe they did the grift for a long time. We don't know. But this woman is going to know the wholeness of this human, a portion of which is an abuser. And there are many reasons why people abuse. And we know one of the primary reasons is that that person themselves has been abused, right? That old saying, hurt people, hurt people. Women are healers. Women are the emotional calibrators of any space that they're in. Women have incredible powers of communication. We can talk things through. And I think that a lot of women in abusive scenarios have the desire and the hope that they can help to heal. And that's not, I wouldn't say that that's false hope, and I wouldn't say that that's a delusional narrative. Because, psychology tells us we are wounded in relationship in early childhood. And we are healed in relationship in adulthood. The challenge is that both people, both adults, have to be on that program. So if the other party, if the person who is the abuser isn't on the program, ready to change really, truly, and authentically, isn't perhaps also getting additional support, that might not happen, but it doesn't mean that the woman is wrong for trying. I think it becomes, I wouldn't say a wrong choice, but it becomes a dangerous and an unhealthy choice when the patterns don't shift, right? When it just becomes the downward spiral that you get mired in and things really don't change.
I've seen that from the male perspective where There was a woman, she was trying to do the work because she had a negatively impactful childhood,
Hmm.
right? The love was
Hmm.
conditional. Get me a straight A, I'll give you validation. Run the fastest marathon, and I'll show you love from both her mother or her father, like a lot of us struggle with.
Yes.
In her adulthood, what she did is that she sought out people that were giving love on conditions.
Sure.
So unfortunately for her, she came across someone that wasn't that way. She came across a man that wasn't that way. And this man was accepting and understanding. But unfortunately for their relationship, because her baseline was the trauma, was a conditional love, she began to feel unworthy of this
Right.
type of relationship, right? So she started to self sabotage and she started to sabotage it. Do you see women experiencing that and maybe they don't understand why they're doing it, but they actually are doing it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and that's a really great and valid point. And I think what it highlights is the unfortunate cliche, Terrain, that we effectively live out our childhood wounds and traumas as adults until we find the right healing ground to resolve them. And it sounds as if that healing ground may have been provided by this healthy masculine partner. And if she wasn't ready to really do the work, and look, we are healed in relationship and partnership, but it's not always specifically our partner who can do the healing. They can provide the ground for the healing, but some of this psychological trauma, it needs additional support. It needs the help of a therapist or a couples therapist. And, I don't want to give the impression that two people in isolation who are unpracticed without the school skills and tools, resources necessary can accomplish that healing. All support is good support. All help is good help. Get it where it's necessary. And I do hope that, whether this particular woman got to the finish line of that particular healing, maybe this was the fertile ground for her to realize that internal work needed to be done. And maybe she doesn't heal it with this partner, but let's hope that it opened up her eyes enough that she desired to heal herself and maybe prepare for the next partner. But yes, I do see that. And look, it happens on both sides, right? Self sabotage is real. That performance for love is real. The idea that you have to earn your love is real. Women work to earn belonging. We give ourselves away in order to try to be useful and needed. And in doing so, we drain ourselves and deplete ourselves and burn ourselves out. And it creates a cycle where we then can no longer give. And so we are discarded anyway. So these patterns that end in pain are always worthy of taking a closer look at and hopefully resolving so that we can create better connections and elevate the healthy masculine and feminine in all of us.
And then when two people get together, because unfortunately in their story it ended, she decided
Mhm.
to um pursue other avenues. Let's
Okay.
be that's probably the nice way to say, right?
That's a
And I say
very
that
tactful way to put it. Yes.
it is, right? And I
Yeah.
say it that way because what I found, and I did a little bit of this, if I have an issue, I go straight to a distraction. And for many
Okay.
of us, distraction is work.
Sure.
I'll work the 10 hours, 12 hours, right?
Yep.
And from the women that I work with who have been abused, because because they provided for themselves for so long,
Yes.
their default is that masculine energy. Let me go drown myself
Yes.
in work so I don't have to focus on it. And what I try to let people know is that the longer your trauma goes unacknowledged and ignored, the more it starts to show up in maybe your hands, your arms, your feet, your legs. Like your body will eventually say, hey, something needs to
Yeah.
happen.
Yep.
Do women tend to ignore their health to maintain the status quo?
Yeah. It's sneaky. The body always keeps the score. And women experience autoimmune disorders in a disproportionately larger number than men do. And I believe, and it's from my own personal experience that I believe this, that a lot of these repressed emotions, experiences of femininity, end up in this literal self sabotage of autoimmunity. And there is research behind this because there's something that triggers that reaction internally. And we don't always know what it is, but I know for myself, it was definitely an emotional trigger that created my own autoimmune disorder, kicked off my own autoimmunity. And I write about this in my book, actually, that feminine women have, I mean, look, everybody has intuition, but feminine women particularly have very powerful intuition. And it is our superpower. Our intuition and emotional depth is our superpower. And it's meant to be the driving force behind our decisions. The adult human makes on average 35,000 decisions a day. Masculine men will want to do it from their superpower, which is logic and reason. Feminine women will want to do it from their superpower, which is emotion and intuition. But in a world that emphasizes masculinity and sees validity in only logic and reason, that intuition and emotional depth is often labeled as irrational, invalid, crazy. And women ourselves, we even believe that. And so we second guess ourselves. We repress our intuition and our emotions. We try not to listen to them. We favor our logic and reason, and that creates a lot of inner turmoil. But here's the thing about being a feminine woman. Even though we try to repress it, even though we may try to ignore our intuition, it will not be ignored. Just try ignoring a woman, anybody. And I see that knowing laughs, right? And that's you can't. If she's got something going on, if there's that little itch of discomfort, if her intuition is speaking up, she will not rest. She will not rest. And whether that rest is finally talking about whatever that intuition is, finally speaking up about it, or whether it's that her body speaks up so loudly for her through pain, through injury, through illness, that intuition will not be ignored.
Would it then be safe to say that society displays more value in the masculine side versus the feminine side, and that's having an impact on women today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is, without naming it, but we're going to name it, that is the patriarchy. And we've been hanging out with that for thousands of years. And it is that box that we live in that we all, it's just, I call it improper training. We've all grown up with this. We've all been indoctrinated into these ideals, these thought forms. We've all embodied them. No one is wrong. No one created it. Nobody's imposing it right now. We're all living it. And we're finally at a point where we're starting to question it to see if that does actually ring true for us. How does it actually feel in the body? Because one of the many detrimental effects of this particular cultural paradigm is that it causes us to perceive masculine qualities as more valuable than feminine qualities. And so feminine women do what I call donning the mask of the masculine in order to survive and make it in this world. We are told success at all costs. We are told give until you cannot give anymore, but then still give some more. We are told that to keep up with the Joneses. We are told that we need to fit into masculine ideals of beauty. And we're all striving for this. And when we are successful as women who are wearing this masculine mask, we are applauded. When we keep ourselves together and make it look good, we are applauded. When we smile and look pretty, even though we're dying inside, we're applauded. That has been the measure of success, and that's what we're all trying to achieve because we want to continue to fit in to our world. But nobody asked us how we would do that on our terms. And no one asked us what our terms are. I believe the terms are not success, but satisfaction. And that women for far too long have been building ladders and gotten to the top of the wall only to realize it was the wrong wall. So let's do it on our terms. Let's do it from a more fundamentally feminine, receptive, intuitive place. And let's rewrite what success means for women today.
For the women out there who see that and they see the masculine examples of success, the high paying jobs, the powerful positions, and so on,
Mhm.
where would they get satisfaction or successful images of the feminine equivalent?
So I honestly, Terrain, I so love your questions. You might be one of my most favorite podcast interviews ever because you get right to the heart of questions. You don't pull any punches, and they're so intelligent, but also emotionally intelligent. The answer is we don't really have them. We've been living under the masculine paradigm and patriarchy for so long that those are the images of success and accomplishment that we revere and that we follow. And that equivalent path for women is really just beginning. Yes, of course, there are a few women who have created success on their own terms, who have walked their own pathways, many of them still largely under the masculine paradigm and through masculine ideals. But not a lot of them have done it from a true, satisfied, receptive, abundant, magnetic place. Which is why it's critical that as many women right now do it. Imagine all of us are in this beautiful garden and the trees are there and they're blossoming and we have the resources we need, but there's no pathway through this garden. And maybe I have my own little corner, but I've got to kind of lift up and peek over to my fellow lady over there. What is she doing? How is she doing it? We're all walking this path together. Because look, Terrain, let's be honest, women couldn't before. A woman couldn't even open her own bank account without a male cosigner until 1974. We weren't allowed to control our own money. My mother wasn't allowed to open up her own bank account. We're barely one generation into the kind of power, choice, and agency a woman needs in order to create a fully satisfied life on her terms. It didn't exist even 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So, do we have a model? We're building it now.
Could then part of the problem, and I'm thinking from a masculine perspective, could part of the problem then be my view of a healthy feminine image may be different than the feminine image that a woman may need?
Yes, I think that's true even for women. I don't think it's just from a masculine perspective. I think that we have been bamboozled for a very long time into what a woman is, right? I mean, growing up, I was told I was prettier if I smiled, that I should be pleasing to the eye. That, I grew up in, it was a bit of a revolution, honestly, for women in the 80s where we were told we could do anything, we could be anything. This was the first time a woman could say, I want to be an astronaut. We didn't have female astronauts until the 80s. Women couldn't do a lot of things that we suddenly were able to do. And so it became very important in this last generation for women to pursue their career first, at all cost, foremost, run with the boys. Remember the era of, what were they? The power suits with the big shoulder pads? Right? We wanted to look like the boys. We wanted to be in the boardroom with the boys. We wanted to have their level and their version of success. And we got 80% of the way there. Even today, a woman only still makes 80% to every dollar that a man makes. But we worked on it. We tried. And what we realized was that women are far more dynamic, and the pursuit of a career at all costs may mean that a woman gets to a place biologically in her body that she's worked so hard on her career, she's opted herself out of developing a family. And perhaps that was something that she wanted too. So a holistic, healthy, satisfied woman has everything she wants when she wants it. Because one thing that's very unique about us is we do have these biological limits. I wish we didn't. I wish we were unlimited, but we do. And so we have to take into consideration these time bound, hormonally bound physical bodies that also have some input into what it is we want our life to look like. Not just the culture, not just the keeping up with the Joneses mentality that says success at all costs. Satisfaction is horizontal, not vertical. So the satisfied woman is satisfied in every arena, every area of her life. And she doesn't necessarily pursue one to the exclusion of others. We want All of it. One of the phrases of the feminine is more, please.
I look at my upbringing, and maybe this puts me in a privileged position. I didn't have
Sure.
my mother and my father growing up, so I was raised by my grandmother, rest in peace, who passed
Oh
away
my
last
gosh,
year.
grandmothers are the best.
They're the best. So I had a very healthy image of women growing up because
Oh,
of her. And then when I was reunited with my parents, those that didn't maybe look like me, different skin color, different religious background, culture background, they helped me become the man that I am today. And there was a
wonderful.
heavy influence on family. And when there's a heavy influence on family, women spearhead that. So growing up, even though I had trauma within my own biological family, women specifically stood up and gave me healthy examples. So when I became an adult and I went out into the world, I viewed women as being able to achieve a lot of things because that was my experience,
Yeah.
right? Then when I went back in history and I started reading some of these things that went on, I was like, wow, this is just a generation or two generations before me, but then what happened over the last couple of years, Alana, is I began to see, especially online through social media, that the foundations for me that represented healthy, satisfied, to use your word, women were being attacked. Were being,
Mm,
maybe there was a shame and the guilt. You know what? Focus on your career. Don't worry about anyone else. Be like more like a man. Be less like this.
yes.
What impact does guilt and shame have on the discovery of a woman's feminine energy?
Well, I mean, I would certainly inhibit it. It would certainly inhibit it. And I want to just back up real quick and give a shout out to grandmas everywhere. I really appreciate that you had that experience. You literally got the evolutionary purpose of grandmothers in your life, and I'm so grateful that you did. I did as well, and I can't understate the value of having my grandmother's presence in my life, and you probably feel the same way. You know, evolution put grandmas in our lives to give us structure and healthy feminine examples. So, yay, I love that. So, shame and guilt for women is heavy. And I actually name something very specific that I call feminine guilt. Guilt in and of itself isn't a bad thing. Okay? So, guilt for just humans everywhere under normal circumstances, guilt is really great because it gives us a emotional twinge or check-in when our behavior is out of alignment with our values. So when we screw up, if we screw up and we didn't feel guilt, we would just, well, we would be psychopaths or sociopaths, but we didn't feel guilt, we would never course correct. We would never apologize. We would never repair. So guilt can actually be healthy when it's felt in that way. Women often feel guilt not out of their own behavior, but they feel guilt in anticipation of disappointing someone else. And I call that feminine guilt because it has nothing to do with them or their behavior and everything to do with how they manage their own selves as to not try and make waves or disappoint anyone around them. Because the perception is if I'm not pleasing to this person, if I disappoint them, if I don't meet expectations, I will be discarded. I won't belong. And the reason that's a problem, if we look evolutionarily, women had to belong to survive. In our tribal culture, belonging was imperative. We did not survive alone in the wild. And again, we are just in these bodies that are not as strong as male bodies. If we have children, we're even more at peril and or in danger. We must belong. We must have the protection of the masculine members of the tribe and the tribe itself. Okay. So that's still encoded. That's still encoded in our psyche. And yeah, we live different lives. We're not in tribes today, but the imperative is still there. So we want to make sure we're liked and needed by the people around us. And the threat of not belonging signifies, if not a literal death, a kind of social death. And so we'll mold ourselves and bend ourselves and put ourselves in boxes and smile when necessary, just so we'll be pleasing and wanted by those around us. And that's where guilt and shame come in. for women.
Speaking about feminine guilt, what are then some of the dangers that women will face when they try to find their belonging, but they end up in the wrong crowd?
Yeah. Well, this is where it's possible to get into cycles of abuse. It's possible to be taken advantage of in this way because, like, look, let's look at what's happening here. And again, I'm not calling anybody out. I have done this. This is something that happens to everyone. There's no bad, there's no blame. Let's just name the behaviors, and once we're aware of it, obviously, then we can change it. We can alter it if we want to. So, what's happening when we're practicing feminine guilt as a woman, if we are trying to be pleasing and accommodating and bending over backwards and smiling even through pain for those around us, just to be needed, just to be wanted, just to be to avoid disappointment, what we're doing is we're abandoning ourselves and we are unboundaried. When we don't have boundaries, when a human doesn't have boundaries, they will be taken advantage of. That unboundaried human will experience resentment of others. They will want to protect themselves from connection. And in doing so, they will be disconnected from others. And disconnection is the deepest source of apathy, depression, anxiety, pain. Disconnection can actually cause death. And we've seen that in psychological studies. And these studies are you can't do these studies anymore. So back in the 70s, when studies like this could be done, we used monkeys and we had baby monkeys, one in a room with its actual mother, one in a room with a stuffed mother, and one in a room with a wireframe mother. The one in the room with the mother did fine. Psychological, emotional adjustment, no problem. Healthy development. The stuffed mother, the monkey with the stuffed mother, developed such psychological derangement, it had to be put down because there was no interaction or connection, even though the mother was soft. The monkey with the wireframe mother died on its own because of the lack of connection. That's how biologically and psychologically imperative it is for us to be connected to others. It's actually a part of our well being on every level. So I hope that that point drives home that underlying desire for a woman in this self protection mode, in this unboundaried mode, performing this sense of trying to be pleasing to others, suffering from this feminine guilt, the deep desire is for connection. The way it's being gone about is not healthy. What we want instead is connection through healthy boundaries, people who actually opt in to honoring and cherishing those boundaries, which keep us safe and provide a safe connection to those who actually care and have big, big hearts and are able to love.
I've seen one woman specifically struggle with that, and she always felt alone and she needed people around her,
Hmm.
even though she would say that she's an introvert, but she wanted people around her. The
Sure.
problem that she was experiencing was the people around her weren't lifting her up, they were draining her.
Right.
And one of the things that she began to realize was, terrain, if I set boundaries, I'm going to be alone. And the pain and maybe the anticipation of loneliness was too much for her to bear in comparison to be around people that were draining her of her feminine energy. Do women struggle with that
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah, this is a really common problem, and here this is going to be one of those times where we're going to explain the problem, but there's no shame here. Okay, so all listeners who identify with the conditions you've just set, get ready. Um, it is very true that women have created and been a part of cycles of overgiving. We are enculturated into this idea that we have to give of ourselves and continue to give even when we're depleted, that we have to do everything for ourselves and everyone else at all times in order to be wanted and to belong. And so we are drained by those around us who expect and take and consume. But this is a two-sided coin to some extent. A woman who is locked into this kind of behavior pattern will feel unwanted if she is not being drained, if she is not with people who drain her. So it is a bit of a chicken or the egg question. Number one, I'm a huge fan of heavy curation. I encourage the women that I work with to curate their lives, their worlds, their families, their relationships heavily so that they support the boundaries that these women want to have in place. Okay. When a woman is unboundaried, giving herself away, abandoning her own needs, it will feel like isolation and rejection when she pulls back. Okay. People around her will be used to her giving herself away. They'll be used to that pattern of behavior, and there will be a shakeup if and when she decides to stop. Okay. There will be a shakeup. And one of the things that I do, and perhaps you do it as well in your work, most strongly in my one on one coaching with women is support them through those shakeups. Because it's one thing to talk about the boundaries you'd like to establish, and it's another thing to hold them. And if you've never held those boundaries before and you're not practiced at it, the easiest thing to do will be to collapse and go back to being drained and overgiving and just, fine, I will pick up your socks and continue to do your laundry. Okay? It's a brave move to stop. But what you do when you create those boundaries is you actually teach the world how they can treat you. And those who aren't able to rise up into that healthier mode of being to actually provide support to no longer drain you, to stop taking from you, to step up into that position of support, that position of generosity, that position which honestly is their highest version of themselves, right? We're calling everyone in to the healthiest version of themselves when we hold our boundaries. Some will rise to that challenge and others won't. And part of the shakeup is holding our boundaries strongly enough, knowing what is right and true and good for us enough that we will either witness the rise of those who will step up and be okay with those who can't. That's where the support comes in. When I said earlier, women really can't exit cycles of abuse without support and help, this is what I mean. There is so much expectation, and there's going to be so much dysregulation in the woman's own body around this patterned behavior that in order to change it, she's going to need a support network. And that's where people like you and the work that you do come in, and hopefully as well people like me and the work that I do come in.
I like to give the example when it comes to loneliness and someone's feeling alone when they're making a change is think of a canvas. The canvas, the brush, and the paint, they're by themselves. But
Mm,
someone, to your point, the support, brings them all together to create the masterpiece. And I think sometimes we're missing the paint, we're missing the brush.
yeah.
Maybe we don't even have the canvas, but that's where women like you, that's where men like me come into play. But one of the obstacles that I see that women who've been abused in some way, they'll turn around and say, "What, Trin? What if I'm not worthy of the type of life that you're helping me paint?" Is
Mm.
that a concern for women to find their worthiness, or take it a step further, their value in the new them, in the new life?
Yeah, I got a little pang in my heart just there. And I'm also going to steal your painting metaphor, by the way. That's a really good one. I'll give you credit. Don't you worry about it. That's beautiful. And look, I think unworthiness is a human problem. I think men experience that too on a deep, deep level. I think unworthiness for all of us in this, look, this culture, this patriarchal culture that we live in, it doesn't actually serve anyone. It doesn't serve the healthy masculine. It doesn't serve the healthy feminine. It's distorted in its ideals. And yes, it centers masculine qualities, but not in a fabulous way. Not in a way that really serves the healthy masculine either. So we are all in our own ways walking around with a little bit of distortion, misunderstandings of what health and our place in this world is. And I think everyone on some level struggles with unworthiness. So I don't want to name it solely as a female or a feminine problem, But feminine unworthiness, historically for us, and again, as I mentioned, is encoded with danger. It's dangerous. If we're not worthy of belonging, we might actually die. And so that creates, I think, an even deeper level of fear and unhealthy attachment to people who may not be ready for a healthy attachment. So I think it just, one of the things I remember having an experience with a person I was dating who was a very privileged man by nature of being born white and male um, in the UK. The most sort of privileged central possible. And I'm not calling anyone out. And I love the UK, and this man was a beautiful man. But he was very surprised to hear one day when I expressed fear of walking down the street in a certain outfit. I said I didn't want to meet him at this location because the event we were going to required me to really dress up in an outfit I felt great in and fabulous in. But I knew walking out my door, I was living in New York City at the time, to meet him at this event would create the kind of attraction that was unwanted and worrisome for me as a woman. And he said to me, "Why would you feel at all fearful of walking? You live in a nice neighborhood. We're going to a nice event. You're a strong, capable woman." He really didn't understand the level of fear and protection that women exist in every single day. So I think that when we talk about a woman's sense of unworthiness, there's going to be just that extra kind of twist, that extra care, that extra consideration we need to place on it. But I do think everyone suffers from it.
Would that then play into, since you mentioned it, their attachment style, if they're the one that's avoidant and they're going to avoid examples of a healthy relationship because of their past and because of their unworthiness feeling?
I think even anxious attachment styles will I think healthy attachment requires healthy people, right? I mean just blanket everybody. Some of these problems are masculine and feminine specific, yes. And sometimes we experience them slightly differently. And I think some issues are just human issues, right? Everybody wants love. That's a human issue. Everyone wants their needs met. That's a human issue. Everyone benefits from healthy attachment. And everyone is capable of healthy attachment. And I do want to demystify a little bit these attachment styles because they've become really they've become almost pop culture these days. We're all talking about them, but they're not fixed. So the listener listening, if you've identified yourself as being one attachment style or another, it's a sliding scale. If you get into a relationship with a different kind of partner, you will likely shift into a different kind of attachment style. A person with a very typically healthy attachment style, if they get into a relationship with someone who has relied deeply on codependence for most of their life, you'll watch yourself alter your attachment style too. So these are just how we adjust and adapt to the relationships we're in. And what I would say really is important about any relationship that we're in is number one, nothing triggers us more deeply than our intimate relationships. And number two, our relationships are going to be the illuminating ground of the darkness we need to mine. So, whatever is within us that needs to be most healed, resolved, tended to at the time, the relationship that we're in is going to be illuminating that. Now, what I hope is that we'll take that opportunity, which is likely going to feel like a giant pain in the rear or deeply uncomfortable or sometimes even scary, and recognize that these triggers are potent potential healers. And if our person is qualified to hold that space, all the better. If they are mildly qualified or willing, let's take it. Let's get more paintbrushes, paints, and canvases for this moment. Let's call in our supportive allies because we need them. None of us can do this alone. We were not built for that. and utilize these challenges to create resolution because that level of self development, interpersonal development, relational development creates health all around and can develop healthy attachments and relationships and create really beautiful connections in the kinds of relationships that all of us, I think, desire.
If support is something that we need, which probably
Yep,
many people will agree
we do.
that we need support,
Yes.
right? Why do you think so many people fall into self-isolation in an effort to fix their problems?
Because of the patriarchy. I think one of the many things the patriarchy gets wrong and does us a disservice with is highlighting individualism and this culture of do it yourself. It's been labeled self help, but none of us really can help ourselves. It's been labeled, individuation, when really none of us is an individual. We are relational beings on a planet with other people. We desire relationship. That is how we heal. The individualism and this emphasis, it's almost like, we really revere people who do it themselves. We really revere the self made man. We really revere the individual who is paving a new pathway, thinking outside the box. And look, I love all that stuff. I love being unique. That's great. But one of the things that that narrative does is isolate us, is make us afraid to ask for help, is position getting help as failure. We feel as if we're weak when we reach out for help. I've spoken to many people who feel like they should only seek therapy when they really can't do it themselves, but the trick is they really can't do it themselves. They
They've
seek
been
it.
trying the same thing over and over again and still not making it work, but yet they'll keep trying, Alana.
And that's the definition of sanity, insanity, isn't it? Doing the same thing over and over again, thinking you're going to get a different result, you can't. So, I just there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that this culture has thrown up. And we need to dismantle them and look through them and past them. And so, people like you and hopefully me, conversations like this, I'm hoping are going to start to turn those wheels within people, create those aha moments of, oh, that's why I've always felt that way. Get rid of the shame and the stigma around seeking support for mental health, self help work. I mean, look, I do believe that each of us is responsible for cleaning up our own street, so to speak, and that when we are triggered, that is something within us that needs to be resolved. But we'll do it. We'll do it with the support of others. We will. There's only so far you can take yourself. There
It's
really is.
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that at work, many people still work. They'll accept many forms of training at their
Yeah.
job. But to your point, in their life, many people will accept zero training in their relations, in understanding themselves. And we laugh because it's funny, but
Oh,
it's like
I laugh because
if
I
you
know, I've known
it's
these people.
true.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
It's so tough.
Yeah, like they'll invest in someone else's dream, their company, right? Whatever
Yeah.
company you work for, they'll invest in that. But when you ask them to even invest 50% of the time that they're investing in other people's company in themselves, many people will say no. And I've asked some of these people, and their response, and I'll get your thoughts on this, is me asking for something that I can't give myself is me showing that I'm either weak or I don't want to be vulnerable. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts?
Ooh. I think you hit the nail on the head with the vulnerability piece. Somehow, education for job training is definitely seen as additive. It doesn't reveal a chink in the armor, let's say. We see it we all agree that higher education opens up more opportunities for you. I don't know if that narrative is true. I've known people with very little education who've done very well. I've known people who with the highest of degrees who can't sort it out, right? So I don't know if one equals the other, but there is a perception that education equals accomplishment equals more opportunities, and it makes you smarter, and smarter is valuable. So that is a great big cultural agreement, but there isn't the same perception for our emotional intelligence. That somehow we've all overlooked the fact that emotional intelligence does require training too. It does require skills as well. And that perhaps the greatest thing we can do in this life is succeed, and I've got air quotes going on big time here, in our relationships. When we have healthy, abundant, connected, fulfilling relationships, that is the pinnacle of humanity. Let me give you the proof. There have been several different studies and examples of this same story where people at the end of their life, on their deathbed, are interviewed. I mean, these people are moments away from death. And they're asked a series of questions, the most poignant of which is, in this life, as you look back and you are about to exit, what are you most proud of? No one says of how much money I made, of how hard I worked, of the companies I bought and sold, of my worldly accomplishments, of the stuff I accumulated. Everyone's answer is something along the lines of how hard I loved, my relationship with my wife, my husband, my partner, my family, my kids. That is what gives people solace in the last moments of their life. That is what they are most proud of. That is the highest pinnacle achievement of humanity, is being in healthy relationships with others. Screw all the other stuff. It's all fun and games. It's great. It is good fun. It's good fun. But it's not what brings life meaning. And we are all seeking meaning to life. I remember years ago, I had a wild experience of 3 days apart. I defended my dissertation and received my PhD and got engaged. I posted photos of both on social media. And at the time, I had a big social media following. Guess which one got more likes and praise?
One that's probably viewed more negative.
No. Being engaged by an order of magnitude was more liked and praised than my PhD. Look, my PhD cost me a ton of money, it took me a ton of time. It was a huge accomplishment. I worked hard on that. People didn't really care. What they were celebrating was that I had found love and partnership. That was more meaningful to people. That was perceived as a greater accomplishment to people. Now, in the moment, it kind of pissed me off. I was like, I didn't really have to work to find this guy and be loved, but boy, I had to work for the PhD. But it just goes to show that there's some innate, understanding and perception that really we're all here to be loved and to love. And that is really the mark of our, yeah, we can say accomplishment as a human. And if that doesn't require some training, if we're not willing to invest in that, what are we doing?
It's like suicide notes, death wishes, or regrets at on deathbed, right? The common theme across for them is more time.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I was true to myself,
Mm-hmm.
and how others feel,
Yes.
right? Like you don't hear, I could have worked another shift. I could have
Right.
pulled
Right.
in more money. Like it's more about the connections of the people. And
Correct.
Alana, one final question before
Yeah.
we close. I'm gonna give you three wishes. What are three things you can't wish for more money, but you can wish for peace on earth? What are three things you wish women knew about spending their time in a healthy way, and why?
Hmm. I think my first wish would be for them to truly know. And when I say know, I mean embodied, like to feel it in their bodies. For them to truly know in an embodied way how absolutely powerful their femininity is. To release any sense of disempowerment or smallness or weakness of femininity and to really own the power behind their femininity. That would be my first wish. My second wish would be for them to be satisfied. I know that's the title of my book, but I chose it for a reason, right? I want all women to be satisfied. And let me define satisfaction for you because that really hits home. Satisfaction is defined as the pleasure derived from the fulfillment of your wishes and needs. Everyone needs to have their needs met. Having your wishes come true is what helps to bring meaning to life, your purpose to life. Fulfillment is holistic, it's expansive, it's horizontal, it's ever evolving. And pleasure is uniquely feminine. We feel it in our bones, in our bodies, we radiate it from our skin. So I want every woman to be satisfied, and I mean on every level in her life, and to recognize that she can have everything she wants and that she needs to do it on her terms. My third wish, in your question, you mentioned something about time. Will you repeat that?
The importance of time, especially when it comes to them improving themselves.
Okay. So in that case, in response specifically to that question, I would wish that she honors the time set by her body. We are in powerful bodies as feminine women. And I'm actually looking at a statue of Kali, who is a Hindu goddess, and her name means time. It comes from the root Sanskrit root that means time. Women are on clocks. We are timely. The question of femininity is when. When do we want to do certain things? Because we don't have time for everything. Men's bodies are built differently. You have all your lives to have children. You have all your lives to develop careers, which is lucky. We don't have that. So I want us to be organized about how we use our very precious time and be honorific of those timestamps set by our bodies, get into those rhythms and flows to decide if that family comes first,